town of Greydale had a simple rule. You don't cut ice in winter unless you sell it. Charles intended something far stranger. He lifted the clear block from the black water, heavy as granite. Its edges caught the pale light like frozen glass. He dragged it through the main street on a sled. Neighbors stopped. Curtains twitched.
Charles, you planning to build an ice palace? Or has the cold finally cracked your skull?
Without a word, he set the block into the empty window frame. It fit perfectly, thick as a man's fist.
That'll do. Let him talk.
Buster thumped his tail once, then his ears flattened. Even the dog seemed to doubt. He lit the lamp. Behind the ice, the flame bloomed into a warm amber eye staring into the snow. By dusk, the cabin glowed like something no one had ever seen. A lit home with windows made of frozen water.
Windows made of ice. In 3 days, it'll be a puddle on his floor, and we'll be shoveling him out.
Elias's mockery spread like wind through a cracked shutter. Charles ignored it and hauled another block from the lake. He fitted the second block into the east window. The cabin's dark afternoon air turned sharp and silver. By the fourth day, the general store had become the town's church, and Elias its preacher.
Mark my words, he's lost his mind and his heat. Ice belongs in a cooler, not a wall.
Inside the cabin, Buster whined softly by the hearth. He pressed his nose against the cold slab that sealed out the world he knew. When the last block slid into place, the cabin filled with a strange, bright coldness. Daylight without wind.
Nearly done. One more to check.
A hairline crack ran from the corner to the center of the kitchen window, thin as a thread of frozen breath. A sliver of doubt cut through his certainty. If the crack spread, the whole experiment might fail. Outside, the whispers sharpened into prophecy. That ice window will shatter by week's end. Charles stood by the cracked kitchen window and did not answer the town. He was careful.
They'd never understand why this works.
A memory surfaced. A hard winter in the far north, years before he came to Greydale. He had traveled with a group of Inuit hunters across the frozen sea ice. They built shelters where there were no trees. An elder, Aguta, showed him a thick pane of ancient ice, cut from a lake that never melted. Aguta pressed his hand against the ice and said, "Still air. That is the warmth, not the cold." The old man traced the edge of a window, ice that trapped heat inside the igloo while the storm raged. Charles had never forgotten. It was not madness. It was medicine passed down for generations.
If I told them it came from natives, they'd call it savage. They'd call me worse.
So he kept the knowledge buried. Let them mock. The ice would speak for itself. A cold snap hit the valley hard, the kind that froze wash water, solid before a man could finish his morning shave. Charles pressed his palm against the inner face of the kitchen ice window. It was cool, but no colder than the wall logs.
42 degrees. Stove's been low all day.
Overnight, the hairline crack had sealed itself under a skin of white frost, as strong as new ice. Buster lay stretched out on the hearth, nose tucked into his tail, not shivering. Across the valley, the other cabins sat dark behind nailed shutters, their families burning split pine as fast as they could feed the fire.
They're burning 3 times the wood I am. It's working.
He cut 1 sled load of firewood that week, in December. That was unheard of, but when he looked out through the frosted pane, the road stayed empty. No one came to see. The light from his windows spilled across the snow like a promise. No one believed. Evening after evening, the amber squares of Charles's windows burned steady while every other house sat blind. From her dormer window, Maggie wrapped her shawl tighter and watched.
60 years in this valley, and I've never seen a man so certain about something so strange.
It ain't natural. Light through ice. It's a trick. Or worse, a sign of something rotten.
Children crept to the edge of the road after dark, daring one another to touch the glowing pane.
Let them look. Curiosity doesn't break windows.
The store buzzed with new words. Devil window, frost glass, the ice hermit.
I've half a mind to break it myself. Show him what we think of his Yankee tricks.
But no one came to Charles's door. Not yet. The light just kept burning, while the town shivered in the dark. Charles's cabin glowed like a lantern left out for someone. A windstorm tore down the mountain that night. Not a blizzard, but a screaming gale that found every crack in every shutter. The ice windows hummed under the pressure, but they held, thick and solid as lake ice in February. Inside, Charles read by the fire while Buster dozed, undisturbed by the shrieking outside.
Not even a whisper gets through. Just like Aguda said, still air.
By morning, half the town emerged to find shutters torn off, lamps blown out, and frost an inch thick on their kitchen tables. Charles's windows still glowed, unbroken, unmelted, holding the warmth in like nothing they'd ever seen.
It's sheer luck. The wind must have split around his place. Don't mean the ice did a blessed thing.
But Maggie, still clutching her shawl, walked closer to the cabin than she'd dared before.
Maybe there's a reason he won't explain. A man that's sure knows something.
The windstorm had proved nothing to those who'd already made up their minds, but it planted a seed in a few quiet hearts. The morning after the windstorm, Maggie wrapped her shawl tight and walked to Charles's door before anyone else was stirring.
Maggie, something wrong?
No, not yet. I just had to see those windows up close. 60 winters I've shivered behind shutters. I've earned a look.
He stepped aside. Inside, the amber light caught her face, and she moved straight to the nearest pane.
It's like looking through a frozen lake, only warm. How do you keep it from dripping?
Thick ice, tight fit. The cold outside keeps it froze. The warm inside stays on this side.
He's hiding something. No man builds a secret just to keep warm.
Outside, Elias noticed Maggie's tracks leading to the cabin. His jaw set like a trap.
She's in there now, whispering with the ice hermit. Next, she'll have us all freezing inside glass houses.
Maggie left without another question, but her doubt hung in the air. The frost on the window thickened. A Chinook wind rolled over the valley, warm and wet, and by noon, every ice window wore a skin of drip water. Elias spotted the sheen of moisture and ran to the store, already crafting his sermon.
Look at that. The ice is crying. He'll be swimming by supper or freezing to death in his own fool's puddle.
Condensation. Warm wind on cold ice. Nothing more. But try telling them that.
The town saw dripping windows and concluded the ice was failing. Never mind that the inside was bone dry.
I touched it this morning. Solid as lake ice. This isn't melting, it's something else.
Charles watched from inside, drying the pain with a rag, explaining would only feed the beast.
We ought to tear him out before his whole place floods and freezes into a tomb.
By dusk, the crowd had grown. Lanterns bobbed like fireflies in the snow, all converging on the glowing cabin. Charles slid the bolt home and leaned against the door. Outside, the shouting started. The pounding rattled the door in its frame. Elias's voice rose above the others, promising to break it down.
Open the door. Charles, we're not asking twice. We'll tear those windows out ourselves if you don't.
They'll ruin everything. One wrong move and they'll shatter the peace in the ice.
Charles pulled the bolt and stepped out. Lantern raised, the crowd fell silent for the space of a breath.
The windows aren't melting. Touch it for yourself. Cold as a winter morning on that side, warm on this.
A trick. You've got some heat device behind it, or you've cursed the glass.
Maggie pushed through the crowd. She walked to the kitchen window and pressed her palm flat against the frost.
It's ice. Plain, thick ice, and the inside's dry. I am no fool, and neither are you, Elias.
Elias's jaw worked, but he didn't move. The crowd murmured, and a few lanterns began to drift away.
They won't forget tonight, and Elias won't forgive. The next test won't be at Chinook. It'll be something worse.
The lanterns faded into the dark, and the cabin fell quiet. But Charles did not sleep. He stood at the window, watching the road.
Maggie stood for me tonight. But one ally won't stop a whole town when the real cold comes.
She held him back with that old woman's sentiment. But sentiment don't melt ice. A real blizzard'll turn those windows into falling blades.
The sky thickened the next morning, deep iron gray, and the air smelled of metal. Even the dogs grew still. Charles dragged the sled of firewood to the porch, his breath hanging in the still air. Every instinct said the storm would be bad.
Elias is telling everyone this storm will prove you are a danger, that your ice will shatter and kill someone.
Let him talk. If he's right, you'll have nothing to worry about. I'll be the first to know.
The first thick flakes fell at noon, fast and heavy. Shutters banged shut across the valley. Charles's windows glowed steady.
If those ice walls fail and bury someone, the blame falls square on Charles. You all hear me.
By evening, the world had turned white. The only light for miles was the glow from Charles's ice windows, a beacon in the gathering dark. Inside the cabin, the whiteout pressed against the ice like a fist, but the light from the stove held steady.
Nothing's getting through. Aguda was right. The ice doesn't fight the cold. It just holds still air.
Buster's ears twitched. A low whine escaped his throat, and he pressed his nose to the frost-rimmed pane. Outside, the storm was absolute. A wall of white that swallowed all sound, all direction. Nothing moved, nothing but the wind. A mile out, a young man named Thomas clawed through the drifts, his map torn away hours ago. "I am done. There's no trail, no shelter. Even the birches are gone." He fell to his knees, and when he lifted his head, he saw it, a faint orange star, unmoving in the murderous white. "Light. That's a cabin. I am not dead yet." He forced himself to his feet, locking his eyes on that single golden point, not knowing it was ice that held the light. The glow never wavered. Through the thick ice windows, Charles's lamp burned on, calling a stranger out of the storm. Thomas dragged himself the last 50 feet, collapsing against the cabin door with a muffled thud that was swallowed by the wind. Buster's bark cut through the storm's howl. Charles threw the bolt, and the door swung open against the white.
Get him inside. Buster, move.
Charles locked his arms under Thomas's shoulders and hauled him across the threshold, ice windows casting warm light over them both. He laid the young man by the stove, wrapping him in wool blankets. Frostbite was already setting in. "The light. I thought I was dead. Then I saw it through the snow, orange through the ice."
It saved him. Not just the warmth, the light through the ice. That's what brought him in.
Outside, the whiteout screamed on, but the amber glow from the ice windows held, a lighthouse the town had ridiculed.
Rest now. You are safe. The ice won't let the cold in, and the light won't go out.
As Thomas slipped into exhausted sleep, Charles stared out through the thick ice pane. The storm hadn't broken, but the secret was no longer his alone. By dawn, the storm had spent its worst, but a bitter wind still scoured the drifts. Inside, Thomas slept and Charles fed the stove.
His light never went out. I watched it all night. If he survived, someone else might have too.
She gathered a few neighbors, reluctant, shivering, but curious. Together, they pushed through the drifts toward the still glowing cabin. Elias pushed to the front, his face set. He raised a fist to pound, but the door swung open before he struck.
We heard there was a body, or a ghost. Don't play hero, Charles.
He's alive. Come see for yourself. The ice held, and the light led him here.
They crowded into the small warmth. Thomas, still wrapped in blankets, gave a weak nod. Elias's jaw went slack. For a long moment, he said nothing. His prophecy of doom lay shattered. "I'd be dead without that light. It was like a star fixed to the ground. God's truth." Charles met Elias's eyes across the crowded room. The ice windows glowed on, unbroken, and the town had no words. Elias broke the silence with a rough voice, his eyes still locked on the glowing pane.
You said it was just plain ice, but no man in this valley ever tried such a thing. How'd you know it would work?
If I tell them, they'll call it heathen. But if I stay silent, they'll never trust the windows.
He looked at Thomas, still wrapped in blankets, then at the thick ice panes. The secret had cost lives before. He would not let it cost more.
I learned it years ago from the Inuit people in the far north. They've used ice for shelters for centuries. It's not magic, it's knowledge.
A murmur rippled through the crowd. Elias stepped back as if struck, his face flushing.
From natives, you expect us to trust heathen tricks?
He saved a man with it. What does it matter where the knowledge came from?
The ice doesn't care who cuts it. It just works. The only danger was your ignorance. And that storm proved mine right.
The room fell silent, but the ice windows still glowed, waiting for judgment. Charles had laid the secret bare. Now the town had to choose. Elias turned for the door, his face a mask of fury. But Charles's voice cut through the shuffling.
You wanted to know how it works. Now you do. The only question left is whether you'll let your pride kill someone next time.
This valley was built on good Christian sense, not on frozen hovels taught by savages.
Christian sense didn't keep that boy alive. Charles did. I'll take plain ice and light over prayer and darkness.
It's true. I saw nothing. Then that orange glow. It pulled me like I was born to walk toward it.
I'll teach any man or woman willing to learn. Cut the ice, fit the frame. No cost except prejudice.
A few townsfolk shuffled forward, avoiding Elias's glare. The silence became a choice. Elias saw the tide turn. With a bitter curse, he shoved his way out into the cold, a few loyal shadows following.
That cost me. He'll never forgive. But if one more life is spared, it's worth the price.
The cabin remained a beacon, and inside, Charles began the first lesson: how to cut clear ice, how to trap light, how to hold warmth against the longest night. On the frozen lake, Charles guided a farmer's saw, showing him how to cut a clear block without shattering the grain. The farmer shook his head, hands trembling less from cold than from old fear of breaking the lake's skin.
Steady. The ice knows what to do if you let it speak for itself.
From the shore, Buster's bark cut the air. Maggie appeared through the pines, breathless and urgent.
Elias is rallying men. He says the ice is an abomination. They plan to smash every window by midnight.
Stay and teach, or run and defend. I can't do both. Get back to the cabin. Anyone willing to stand with me, bring a lantern. I'll be there.
The two farmers looked at each other, then at the ice block. One nodded slowly. Charles threw down the saw and ran for the tree line. Buster a gray streak ahead of him. Dusk was bleeding to dark. The cabin windows already glowed, but so did the line of torches moving toward it. Charles burst from the tree line, breath tearing his lungs. Buster a low growl at his heels. The torches were already at the door.
Stand aside. Charles, we're here to take down that abomination. No more tricks.
These windows saved a man's life. You'll have to break me before you break them.
You'd die for a block of frozen water, for heathen nonsense.
I'd die for the truth of it. Try me.
Maggie pushed through the mob, a lantern swinging in her hand, and planted herself beside Charles.
If you are going to smash these panes, you'll smash my lantern too. And then you'll sit in the dark with your guilt.
The two farmers from the lake appeared out of the dark, carrying pine torches of their own. They said nothing, but they stood with Charles.
Put the torches down. Come inside. See what light really looks like. And I'll teach you to make your own. No more darkness.
The torches still burned, but they did not move. The night held its breath, and the ice windows glowed, waiting. A young father doused his torch in the snow. His wife had given birth during the whiteout. He walked forward alone. "I've got a newborn," the man said. "Show me how to keep her warm." Charles opened the door wide. The ice glow spilled out, and one by one, torches were snuffed and left in the snow.
Are you coming in, Elias? Or will you freeze with your pride?
Elias did not answer. He turned his back and vanished into the dark. But 3 of his own men stayed behind. Inside, Charles held a lantern behind the kitchen pane. The light passed through, and the room saw what a frozen window truly was.
This light saved my life. I'll build ice windows in my own cabin if he'll teach me.
By dawn, the ice on the lake rang with saws. Charles moved among his students, correcting angles, promising light.
Aguta, they're learning. Your wisdom will light this valley now.
And by midwinter, Charles's was not the only warm, lit cabin. The valley glowed like a sky turned upside down. By the time the days began to lengthen, the sight of ice in a window frame no longer drew stares. It drew envy. At the general store where Elias once preached, farmers now traded tips on cutting clear blocks and sealing seams. Charles found himself surrounded by new students every morning. Young fathers, old trappers, even the doubting farmer.
Thickness is everything. A 2-inch block holds more still air than 3 1-inch panes.
Maggie watched from her porch, her own windows, now glowing, a cup of tea steaming in the cold.
He did more than build windows. He gave us light in the darkest months.
Even the general store, once the epicenter of mockery, had installed 2 ice panes above the counter. Elias had gone quiet. People said he took to his cabin and refused to look outside after dark, but the children didn't care. They built snow forts and pointed at every glowing window like stars. Charles stood on the ridge one evening, Buster at his side, looking down at the valley's new constellation. For a long while, Charles just stood there, the cold nipping at his beard, Buster's fur dusted with frost.
Not one dark window. Not one. They took the knowledge and made it their own.
He walked down into the town, past cabins that once mocked him, their icy windows now his legacy. At the end of the road, Elias stood on his porch, arms crossed. He didn't speak, but he gave a single nod. Then he turned and went inside, leaving his door open just wide enough to let the light spill out. Charles returned home, lit the lamp, and sat at his table with pen and paper. He wrote of Aguta, of still air, of the night the light saved a man. He wrote so the next generation wouldn't forget. Outside, the valley's constellation burned brighter than ever, a chain of golden ice, each pane a promise kept, and on the table beside the lamp, a small block of ice, thick, clear, and perfectly still, caught the flame and held it. Charles closed his eyes. Buster sighed at his feet. The ice windows glowed on, unbroken, and winter had finally met its match. The next morning, Charles rose early to see the sun pass through the kitchen pane, not blazing, but steady, like a memory of Aguta's voice. He poured coffee and stood where the light fell, the thick block holding the cold out and the quiet in.
I'll teach them that too. Warmth isn't a flame, it's stillness.
Buster padded over, nose cold against his hand. Charles scratched his ears, a simple habit that held the morning together. From the porch, he saw Maggie already walking to the lake with a saw, just as he once had. When the whole valley thought him mad, he smiled, not as a teacher, but as a man who had finally been heard. The valley had changed, and it would keep changing. Each winter, a little brighter, each storm a little less cruel. But in his cabin, the ice windows would remain. His first, his proof, a frozen secret that had saved lives. He went back inside, placed the coffee beside the small block of ice, and watched the flame refract into a quiet amber dance. And there, in the stillness, with Buster at his feet, Charles knew the deepest truth. The cold does not win where the light is held. Charles stoked the fire one last time. The flames caught in the ice panes, bending into shapes he no longer needed to name.
Aguta would smile now, not because he was right, but because the stillness finally won.
Outside, the snow fell without wind, blanketing the valley in fresh silence. Every cabin glowed like a lantern adrift. The small block of ice on the table had begun to soften at the edges, a single bead of water tracing the flame's reflection. But the windows would hold until the thaw, and by then, the lessons would be carved deeper than the ice itself. Charles rose at dawn, as he always had, and stepped onto the porch. Buster followed, sniffing the cold air. The valley was quiet, not with the silence of fear, but of a world at rest.
It worked. Not because of me, but because of those who came before. I just carried the light.
The ice windows were no longer a curiosity, no longer a scandal. They were simply the way winter was endured. And in the cabin, the small block of ice still held the candle's flame, a quiet heart at the center of the longest night.